بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب زدني علما.
Now, there are different ways you can install these controller certificates. So total, there are five different ways we can say. So in our example, we'll be using Enterprise CA, which is something where we will be installing our own CA, a Microsoft CA, which is responsible for providing the certificates to each controllers. So let's go and see some of the overview on the different options we have. So there are five different options. In these five options, we can say the one option is from Cisco Public Infrastructure. So these two options relating to that, Cisco PKI. And the other option is we'll be using Symantec DigiCert option. That's the second option. And the third option is we'll be using Enterprise CA. So roughly, if we categorize the different ways, we have three different options. And in this Cisco PKI, again, public infrastructure, there will be a manual process, and or you can do it automated process. So that's what these two options. There is a manual and automated. Similar way in the Symantec as well, there will be an automated as well as the manual process. So the overall 5 ways it will make. But if you roughly divide them, there will be 3 different sources from where you can get the certificate. So let's see some overview on this. Now one thing you need to remember, whatever the method you are using. So if I'm using any of these 4 methods, there will be a root certificate which will be pre-installed. So when you get the controllers will have the root certificate installed, except the Enterprise CA. Because in the Enterprise CA, you have to do it because you are using your own CA, Enterprise CA, which is from Microsoft we are using in our labs. So the first step will be installing the root CA. But whereas if I'm using the other 4 options, maybe in the production networks or any other places, in that case, you don't need to install the root certificate. So let's quickly see one by one. I'll start with the first one. The first one by using Symantec. Now in this, now if I'm using this option, there will be a CSR generated for each controller. Let's say this is my vManage. Now again, the process remains the same for vManage or other controllers, vBond or vSmart. So this vManage is going to generate the CSR, initiate the CSR, which is certificate signing request. And it is going to automatically send it to the Symantec Digitech server. So this is automated process. You can see the difference here. Automated means you don't need to manually send to the server or the digital server. It's a kind of automated process. So we can say that is like the first and the second step. You can see here. So the initiate the CSR and then you send it to the server. So the first and the second steps. Now in the next step, what you have to do is you need to raise a Cisco tag case. So you need to contact the technical assistance center for Cisco. So where you need to open a case to complete the sign-in process. So we can say this is like the third step where you need to open the case with Cisco Technical Assistance Center so that you can complete this sign-in process. Now, once this process is, once you do this, once you raise the case, then after that, the certificate will be signed. So now this CSR will be signed and approved. So this is like the next step or the fourth step we can say. And once it's being signed, now the vManage will be automatically getting that signed certificate. So once it is approved, then the vManage is going to retrieve the cert and get the cert automatically. Now this process is again all automated. So you can see the word clearly says it's automated process. You are not going to do much except you can see there is a Cisco tag case you need to open up. That is something you need to do. Now once the certificate is signed, the vManage is going to automatically retrieve the cert and each signed certificate, and is going to install on its own controller. Now the same thing happens on the vBond as well as the vSmart. Okay. So in this case, as I said, the first four, the root certificate will be pre-installed. So you don't need to install the root certificate. So the root certificate you get from the Symantec, it will be pre-installed. The only thing what happens here is automatically the CSR will be generated to the Symantec, and you need to open the case. And once it opens the case, then it's going to be signed and retrieves that, and it's going to install on the controllers. So this is kind of automated process. And similar way, if you try to see the second one is same as the previous one. The only difference is it is a manual process. So in the manual process, again, we are using the Symantec digital server. Now in this case, the same thing, we will be initiating the CSR, certificate sign request. So nothing but I'm sending my certificate and asking the Symantec digital server to sign in and validate that. So just like, the passport, you issue some documents and that will be verified and being sent to you. Okay. So in this, the CSR is generated for each controller and it is downloaded locally. So which means this CSR will be locally present, downloaded, and there will be a separate certificate request for each controller will be made. Okay, so there will be a manual submit of the certification request you have to do. So the first process is like initiate the CSR and then download the CSR locally. And then you are going to manually submit the certificate request. So it's not automated. You have to manually do this. So there will be some kind of portal, Symantec digital portal, where you need to upload your certificate. So we'll be doing the similar process in our enterprise CA as well. And also you need to open the case, Cisco tag case that need to be opened for the complete process. And once this process is done, then probably you will be retrieving that certificate once it is done. Then again, you have to manually upload these certificates to the vManage, vBond, and the vSmart. So the basic difference between these two here is like you will be using the Symantec digital cert, where one of the process will be automated, the other process you have to do it manually a little bit. Now let's see the third option here. Now in the third and the fourth options, we'll be using the Cisco PKI infrastructure. So the difference between the previous one and this one is, so in the previous two options, we have been using the Symantec DigiCert. Whereas here, the third option, which is again the recommended option from Cisco, where we'll be using an automated process and we'll be using the Cisco public key infrastructure certificate signing in. Now, if you compare this with the first option, now the first and the third are almost same, but there are two differences. Now, again, if you're running this Cisco public infrastructure, the first prerequisite is you must be running the vManage 19.1. That's a minimum version you must be running. And the difference with the second option is we'll be using the Cisco public key infrastructure instead of using the Symantec. So in the first option, we were using the Symantec DigiCert option. And the third difference is we don't need to open the case. So if you remember in the first two options, we need to open the Cisco tag case. That is something required, but this is something not required in the third option. So the Cisco tag do not need to be opened in order to complete the sign-in process. So how it's going to be, like the administrator will initiate the CSR and this CSR will be sent to the Cisco server. So every controller will have its own CSR. So here in the diagram, you can see there is a vManage, but every controller have its own CSR, which is sent to the Cisco server. And this is automatic process. Again, as I said, the third option is automated. So this process is automatically sent to the Cisco PKI certificate server. So after that, after the Cisco server is going to sign, and it is going to send it back to the vManage. So after the signing is complete, the vManage is going to get that CSR signed automatically, signed certificate, and it's going to install on the respective controllers. So later on, what it will do is it is going to install on this controller. And again, the similarity in the previous two options is there is no root certificate required. Again, remember this point, the root certificate need to be installed only in the enterprise CA. But whereas the remaining four options, we don't need a root certificate to be installed. It is a kind of pre-installed on each controller. So let's move to the fourth option and try to understand. Now, again, this is using the Cisco PKI, the public infrastructure. So which means now this is same like this second option. So instead of using Symantec, we are using the Cisco PKI. And one more thing, there is no need to open the Cisco tag case. That is again not required. And the name says it's manual, which means we will be manually downloading the certificate and manually sending the certificate. So probably we are going to request the certificate for each controller manually with the help of some portal. So let's try to see the option. Again, for this as well, you must be running the vManage 19.1, probably that is required. And as I said, it is similar to this one. You can compare this, sorry, not this one, the fourth one. Of course, for both, it's the same thing. So here we don't need to open the Cisco case. As I said, Cisco tag case is not required. So the administrator is going to initiate the CSR, the certificate signed in request. And this certificate signed request is downloaded as a local copy. So here the CSR is going to be generated for each controller and is copied or downloaded locally. And then there will be a request which is being sent for each controller to the Cisco server. And this request has to be done manually. So if you remember in the previous, it was automated. The only difference is this request has to be sent manually. Now, mostly when you do, now the manual option is something required where you don't have internet access. That is one possible case where you may want to do it manually, these options. So you need to go to something called plug and play connect option, where you go to the software.cisco.com. There will be an option called plug and play connect, and there will be a certificate options. And probably on that particular Cisco portal page, you have to do this manually. And once you do this, then probably the Cisco server is going to provide you the identity certificate, which is being signed, CSR, we can say. The CSR, which is generated. Once the signing is complete, the certificate will be downloaded to the vManage by the administrator. And again, this process, we have to do it manually, probably the vManage. And then the vManage is going to install this certificate back onto the other controllers. So mostly the certificate installation is done from the vManage to vBond and vSmart. So in the enterprise CA also, which we'll be using, the same thing happens. Again, in this option also, there is no need of a root certificate because the root certificate is by default installed on each controller.